the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I, of course, am Nick Beres, and we've got a good show on tap for you. We're going to open up the phone lines, let you join in the conversation. Usually we'll do this show, and we usually do, in the springtime, okay? At a time when everything's beginning to bloom. We're coming out of the winter time when everything was dormant, and many of us are dealing with allergies. And hopefully by midsummer, for most of us, some of that fades away a bit. Not so much, at least for me this year, even though I've had different symptoms. And I've been talking to a bunch of people in our newsroom the same way. Amy Watson, Adam, they're all saying that they've got more allergies this summer than they can remember for whatever reason. And I'm talking about now during the summer months. What about you? Do you feel it? Are you getting allergy shots? Do you take antihistamines? What are your symptoms? You know, we'll get into all of that and just talk about why things are happening maybe later in the summer. And maybe it's a fallacy to think that allergies only come in the spring. I know for a fact there are people that have allergies year-round that are allergic to a lot of things. So let's talk about it. The number 737-7587 if you want to join in the conversation. With us this morning to talk about it is Dr. Cosby Stone from over at Vanderbilt. It's nice to see you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great to be here.
You're the Doogie Howser guy.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
No, well, you just look so young and you're so good on air. And okay, you are a physician. You are a researcher in immunology. How do you say that?
Allergy and immunology.
Immunology.
Yeah, thank you.
Got you. And so you're someone who can answer a lot of these questions for us.
I hope so.
Okay, is there anything unusual going on here locally that maybe is people noticing more allergies in the summer? Or is that maybe, look, it's par for the course and different people are going to have different reactions time of the year? Because I noticed it for the first time more for me this summer, and I was telling you before the show about some of my symptoms. Not the same ones I get in the spring, but more I feel a little sluggish. Maybe I'm not thinking as clearly sometimes, and when I take an antihistamine, it seems to help.
Yeah, well, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about the fact that, you know, I go and walk my dog twice a day, and I always spend a lot of time staring into the ditch because that's where he wants to be. Yeah. And right now, it's the peak of the season where the grass is sending up their little fronds, and they're covered in pollen, and they're just, you know, they're very delicate, but if you look down at the grass, you'll notice that it kind of looks hazy from a distance, and then up close you notice the little pollen-bearing fronds. And so grass pollen is really high right now. And for people who, you know, we usually talk in the spring, and the story then is all about tree pollen.
All these blooms.
Right, yeah, all the blooms from all the trees and the yellow car days, and, you know, but in the summertime, the grass pollen can be just as heavy, you know, just as important for a lot of people. And the other thing too is that if you look beyond the grass, there's actually a lot of weeds that are already blooming too. And so it's not things like ragweed, which are going to come in the fall, but it's things like English plantain, you know, which are these tiny little catkins. You know, that's a nice little herbology term. You know, looks like a cat tail. Okay. You know, but it's tiny and it has little bits of little flowers sticking off the side. So they stick up really straight, and they've got the tiny little catkins, you know, on a wide-leafed weed. So there's a lot of different pollens that are coming out right now.
Okay, so it's not a surprise that some people are. Is it possible though that your body changes? Like, for instance, I said I didn't feel this last summer. Yeah. But I felt it this summer, and it seems like sometimes my reaction to what's in the environment changes from year to year. Now, I don't know if that's because the environment is changing, though I assume we have grass pollen every year, or possibly as humans, as we age or whatever, our body chemistry can change a bit and make us more susceptible to some pollen and maybe more resistant to others. I don't know. Does that happen, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, so let's take it on a case-by-case basis, which is that sometimes the environment around us changes. You know, it's a particularly wet year. It's a year where we are driving our cars a lot, and so the ragweed, you know, next to the side of the road gets a lot of CO2 from that. It grows really big and strong. So sometimes the things that we do, and sometimes the environment around us, determine how bad our symptoms are going to be. And sometimes we change individually, you know, where something was not bothering me before, and now I've become susceptible to it.
Chemically, is your body chemistry changes?
I wish I knew the answer to that.
Okay, so no one really knows, but we all can change. Our bodies go through changes. You become more sensitive to something maybe you weren't before.
Right, and you know, for some people, we definitely know that if you lived in an area where you grew up with a certain kind of pollen and then you move away, you've been gone for 10 years and then you come back, then you oftentimes will have lost the tolerance to all the things that you grew up with. We see this especially in our patients who come from the military backgrounds, where they grew up in Tennessee, then they got deployed, then they got moved around all over the United States, and finally they're saying, okay, great, I'm coming back to Tennessee. They come back to Clarksville, to the base, and then they're miserable, right? So you can lose your tolerance to things that you once were tolerant to. You can also, move from an area where you were never exposed to the things that we have here. I'd like to say that Nashville is a nice, comfortable spot for all the plants that love to grow in the north and all the plants that love to grow in the south. So we've got, Tennessee has the highest biodiversity of almost any state in the United States, especially as you go from Nashville up to Crossville, where I grew up, and into Knoxville and into the Smokies. The Smokies has the highest biodiversity in the United States. Temperate rainforest is what they call it.
My butt.
That's right.
I can be fine here. I'll go to Knoxville even, and that's closer to the Smokies, of course. And I feel the symptoms far worse when I'm in Knoxville than here.
That's right. And Knoxville just has so many different kinds of flora. And also Knoxville has a lot of geographical features that, like Nashville, sort of trap everything down in a bowl, because our forebears, they had the wisdom of saying, oh, well, we want to be close to the river because that means you can put things on barges. Well, the problem for us is that now, if you're close to the river, that means that you're usually down in a bowl, and so all of the pollens and the pollution sort of like sit on top of us, and we really can't ever escape from it. So if you go up on the plateau where I'm from, at least you get a breeze that blows it all away from time to time.
So if you really wanted to escape allergies, the only place that you can go where it's fairly minimal is a desert. Is that right? I mean, seriously, if I wanted to escape and not treat myself or whatever, but just get the heck away from all allergies, I need to move to Mesa, Arizona.
Maybe so. So there's a period of time where the New York City, when we were sort of coming out of the era of our history where we were really dirty all the time, and then we had open sewers and everybody was always exposed to bacteria, a lot of people really didn't have allergies. But as, when the first sewer systems got put into New York City, they started noticing within 10 to 15 years that, people started having hay fever, ragweed. Now, that's not to say we should go back to having open sewers. That would be a terrible idea. But, the cleanliness of our society seems to have something to do with the fact that we now have more allergies, right? So within a short period of time, New York City tried to eradicate hay fever by going around with flamethrowers and burning all the ragweed and all the sides of all the grass and stuff. And they created a small island where people didn't have hay fever within the city by getting rid of all their weeds. It wasn't sustainable, of course. That's a very expensive thing to do. But during this period of time, people would try to find all the places that they could go to get away from their symptoms. And usually it was having to go somewhere far away on the seashore or the desert, but that doesn't really help most of us. You can't really escape from your allergies.
So I guess the safe thing for me, what I've known at least the last few weeks when I've dealt with this, is stay inside more. I'm staying inside more anyway, simply because it's been so hot. Now I love being outside, but is that it? Stay inside more? I mean, not that it'll insulate you, but if you're inside, isn't it better than being outside?
I would say, honestly, that we are still trying to figure out the answer to this question. One thing that we've learned in the last 10 years is that sometimes hiding from your allergies actually makes them worse. So we've learned, about 5 years ago, a landmark study came out that showed that if you have a child who's maybe predisposed to getting a peanut allergy, they've got allergic skin like eczema, something like that, that if that child from infancy up until about the age of 2, that you're very meticulous about avoiding peanuts, turns out that your child is 80% more likely to get a peanut allergy. And it's because we don't get a certain amount of exposure leading to tolerance. And so that's sort of the concept that we were talking about before. The person who grew up with it and then moves away from it, like if we are all moving away from it by going inside, we might lose our tolerance. Now, the problem is a lot of us already have symptoms. Do we need to be staying outside to maintain tolerance? Do we need to be exposing ourselves to these things, at least on a low level, so that we don't lose our tolerance? We don't know the answer to that question. We want to know the answer to that question. So that's the kinds of things that people are studying. Now, when you go a little further, we know that we can induce tolerance in you by giving you a small amount of the things that you're allergic to in the form of allergy shots, in the form of like the FDA-approved sublingual tablets, that you put under your tongue. By giving you a small amount of the things that you're allergic to gradually over time. That works really, really well for things like pollens and environmental stuff. Doesn't work so well for food yet. It's still a little bit, on the more dangerous side. So those, if you're going to get desensitized to a food, then you want to do it in the context of a university trial, I think.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But we know that we can make people less allergic over time to some things by giving them a small amount and then working them up to tolerance.
We've all heard about the allergy shots. In fact, Amy Watson asked me when I was doing the tease for the show to inquire about when's the best time to get the allergy shots. Now, she's got allergies, it sounds like, year-round. Mine seem to be more seasonal, even though, who knows, I may have more minor ones, but she has them year-round. And I think she's had shots maybe in the past, or maybe she's considering them. Is there a time of year typically when you go and do the tests, you determine what it is, and then get the shots that's better than others?
Yeah, if there's a time of year when you can come off of your antihistamines more easily, then that makes it easier for us, because our test relies on the fact that, I rolled up my sleeve just to be able to demonstrate things like this. So there we go. So we put a tiny prick of the things that you might be allergic to on the surface of your arm, and then we put a control test with histamine in it and a control test with saline in it. Nobody should make a hive to saline. If you do, that means that your skin's really reactive.
Oh, okay.
But everybody should make a test to the histamine, and everything that you make a positive test to that's not histamine, we would interpret that in context of the histamine to determine whether you're allergic to it or not.
Okay, and so that's your indicator. So then you find out, for instance, some kind of dust gets really red.
Yeah, dust mite. If dust mite gets really red and you've been off of your antihistamines, then we sort of have a sense that you are sensitive to the dust mite. And so then we talk to you and we get a sense of your story. And if your story is that every morning I wake up and I've got terrible postnasal drainage and my eyes are red, then that sounds like a dust mite allergy, because when we sleep, we're sleeping as close to the dust mites as we're ever going to be, because they try to get in our pillows and our bed to eat our dead skin. So,
as we go to break, then, I'm guessing that you do the tests, I don't know with how many, and maybe you expand if you have trouble finding it, but you probably have several substances that you do initially that are the typical allergies, right?
We do a panel based on
pollen.
We do a panel based on the plants and trees and molds and things like that grow in this area.
Makes sense, common sense, and you'll go through it until, if you know someone's showing symptoms, you know they have an allergy, it's not showing up here, then you'll try more and more until you find what it is?
It depends. I mean, usually what we try to do is, if the first panel doesn't show up positive, we try to really hone in on, well, where do you have the symptoms? What are the symptoms? And sometimes we'll say, okay, well, we can still send a blood test, to confirm or disprove, this skin test that was negative.
Sure.
So the other thing is that some people have the same symptoms, experience very similar symptoms to allergies, but aren't sensitive to allergens. And that's totally okay. Like, it's okay from our perspective because we can still treat it. Patients often get frustrated because they say, well, I got all the same symptoms as allergies, but I don't have allergies. Yes, you don't have an immune system reaction to something in the environment that's causing your symptoms. You just have those symptoms for a different reason. And we'll help you figure out how to manage that.
On that note, let's take a break. When we come back, we can open up the phone lines. If you have a question about allergy medicines, what you're taking, if you have a story to share about what you're dealing with in terms of allergies, I'd like to hear it, because I'm always curious at the different symptoms people have along those lines, even though I know there's the typical ones: itchy nose, runny eyes. 737-7587 is the number. We will be back with Mr. Stone in just a moment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.